There's no one-size-fits-all answer. The right service delivery model depends on your child's specific needs, their learning profile, what kind of intervention they're receiving, and what the goal is. I'm Jenny Sherson, ex-special educator turned dyslexia interventionist. It wasn't so long ago that I, too, was overwhelmed by balanced literacy versus structured literacy, education speak, and everything in between. Fast forward after many, many hours of self-driven education, and you'll see I've built a thriving dyslexia practice helping students from age 6 to 18. My specialties? Working with a quote-unquote difficult, almost always 2E, student, and breaking down the complexities of dyslexia into everyday language strategies and action steps. Okay, so you're in the IEP meeting and they're going over your child's services. We're recommending 30 minutes of reading support twice a week. A reading specialist will pull him from his classroom to work with him in the resource room with a small group. You nod. That sounds good. Your child is getting reading help. 30 minutes twice a week. You make a mental note of that. The meeting continues. There's more discussion, goals, accommodations, a lot of information coming at you all at once. You sign, you leave, and if someone asked you later what you agreed to, you'd say, my child is getting reading services, 30 minutes twice a week. But here's what's interesting. They did tell you the rest. They said reading specialist. They said pull out from the classroom. They said resource room. They said small group. They said all of it. You just didn't know what any of that meant. You didn't know that those details mattered just as much as the 30 minutes twice a week, because nobody ever explained that how services are delivered matters just as much as what services are being provided. Today, we're talking about service delivery models, the thing they mention in meetings but never fully explain. The details that sound like logistics but are actually critical to whether intervention works or not. Because here's the truth. That 30 minutes twice a week, it means something completely different depending on where it's happening, who's providing it, and how it's being delivered. So let's break down what all of these details actually mean, because chances are you've heard these terms, but nobody ever stopped to explain what they are or why they matter. Pull-out services mean your child leaves their general education classroom and goes somewhere else, a resource room, a learning lab, whatever, to work with a specialist. It's a separate space away from their regular classroom. Push-in services mean the specialist comes into your child's general education classroom to provide support. Your child stays in the room with their peers and the help comes to them. Co-teaching means there are two teachers in the general education classroom, the regular teacher and a special education teacher, working together to support all students, including your child. Consultation means that the specialist isn't working directly with your child at all. They're consulting with the classroom teacher about strategies and accommodations, but the classroom teacher is the one implementing them. And then within these models, you have other variables. Is your child working one-on-one with the specialist or in a small group? How many kids are in that group? Are they all working on the same skill? Or is the specialist trying to address different needs at the same time? Now, all of this probably was mentioned in your IEP meeting. They probably said small group or push-in support or co-taught classroom. But if you're like most parents, those words just kind of floated by because you didn't know they were important details. You were focused on the 30 minutes twice a week. That was the number that stuck. So why does this matter? Why should you care whether it's push-in or pull-out or consultation? Because different models serve different purposes. And what works for one child might not work for another. Let me give you an example. Pull-out services in a quiet space with minimal distractions. For some kids, that's exactly what they need. They need that focused, intensive time where they're not distracted by what's happening in the general education classroom, where the specialist can work at their pace without worrying about keeping up with the rest of the class. But for other kids, pull-out services mean they're missing what's happening in their classroom. They're leaving during core instruction time. And while they're getting reading support, they're missing science or social studies or math. So you're solving one problem and possibly creating another. Push-in services sound great in theory, right? Your child gets support without missing anything. They're not singled out because the specialist is in the room helping multiple kids. But here's the reality. In a busy general education classroom with 25 other kids and everything that's happening in that environment, how much focused, intensive intervention is actually occurring? Is your child getting the specialist's full attention, or is the specialist bouncing between multiple students, while also trying not to disrupt what the classroom teacher is doing? Co-teaching can be amazing when it's done well, when both teachers are truly collaborating, when they're both actively teaching, when your child is getting the benefit of two sets of expertise in the same room. But co-teaching can also mean one certified teacher and one assistant teacher in the room. Or it can mean the special education teacher is basically floating around helping kids as needed, which isn't the same thing as targeted, systematic intervention. And consultation? Consultation means your child isn't getting direct services from a specialist at all. The specialist is telling the classroom teacher what to do, and the classroom teacher, who already has 25 other students and a full curriculum to teach, is supposed to implement specialized intervention strategies on top of everything else they're doing. For some kids, in some situations, consultation might be appropriate. But for a child who needs intensive, systematic, multisensory intervention for dyslexia, consultation isn't going to cut it. Now, let's talk about something else that nobody mentions. When your child's IEP says 30 minutes, that doesn't usually mean the 30 minutes of instruction. It should mean that. But let's walk through what frequently really happens. Your child is in their general education classroom. The specialist comes to get them, or they're supposed to go on their own, but they're 8, so someone has to remind them. There's the transition time getting from the classroom to wherever the services are happening. Then they have to get settled, get out materials, refocus from whatever they were just doing in the class. Now we're maybe 5 minutes in. So that 30-minute block, we're down to 25 minutes. Then there's the actual instruction time. And then at the end, there's packing up, transitioning back, getting back to the classroom, and figuring out what they missed and what they're supposed to be doing now. By the time you account for all of that, your 30 minutes of services is realistically maybe 20 minutes of actual instruction time. And if your child is in a group, that 20 minutes gets divided by however many kids are in that group. So if you've got 3 kids in that group, each working on different skills, your child might be getting 6 or 7 minutes of direct, individualized instruction twice a week. I'm not saying this to make you panic or that this can't work, but I am saying this so you understand what you're actually agreeing to when you sign that IEP. So how do you know what model is right for your child? Well, that's the question, isn't it? And here's what I need you to understand. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. The right service delivery model depends on your child's specific needs, their learning profile, what kind of intervention they're receiving, and what the goal is. A child who needs intensive, systematic phonics intervention is probably going to need something different than a child who needs support with reading comprehension in their content area classes. A child who gets overwhelmed in busy environments might need pull-out services in a quiet space. A child who really struggles with transitions might do better with push and support so they're not constantly leaving and coming back. The intensity of services matters too. If your child is significantly behind and needs to close a large gap, they probably need more than 30 minutes twice a week, regardless of the delivery model. Research on effective intervention for dyslexia talks about 45 to 60 minutes of daily instruction, not twice a week, daily. And the group size matters. One-on-one intervention looks very different from small group intervention, which looks very different from support in a classroom of 25 kids. None of this information really sinks in during the IEP meeting unless you know why it matters, unless you know what questions to ask about it. Because schools will often propose whatever model is most convenient for their schedule, their staffing, and their logistics. And if you don't know why these details matter, if you don't know what the implications are, you'll agree to whatever they propose because you're focused on that 30 minutes twice a week. Here's what I want you to take away from this. Service delivery models are not all interchangeable. The where, the how, the who, the group size, all of that matters. 30 minutes twice a week tells you almost nothing about what your child is actually receiving. And the next time you're in an IEP meeting and they say pull out or push in or small group, those aren't just logistics. Those are critical details about how effective that intervention is actually going to be. You don't have to just nod along when they mention these things. You can ask questions. You can ask what that model looks like in practice. Now, you can't ask which kids will be in a group, but you can ask how many kids will be in the group. You can ask what your child will be missing in the classroom during pullout time. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're being difficult for asking these questions. This is your child's education. You need to understand what you're agreeing to. Now, understanding that different service delivery models exist and why they matter is one thing. Knowing which model your child actually needs, knowing how to evaluate what they're proposing against what the research says about effective intervention, knowing what questions to ask in the meeting to make sure the proposed services are actually going to work, knowing how to push back when the model they're proposing isn't appropriate for your child's needs, that's different. That's the work we do in Together Through Dyslexia, because it's not enough to know that pull out and push in are different. You need to know which ones make sense for your child based on their specific learning profile, their current levels of need, and what the research says about effective intervention. And you need to know how to have that conversation in an IEP meeting in a way that moves the team toward what your child actually needs, instead of just accepting whatever is most convenient for the school. If you're tired of walking out of IEP meetings realizing later that you didn't really understand what you agreed to, if you're ready to walk into meetings knowing not just what to listen for, but why it matters, I'd love to work with you. All the information about Together Through Dyslexia is in the show notes. You don't have to figure this out on your own. Until next time, bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Literacy Untangled. If you loved this episode as much as I did, head on over and rate and subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you want to continue the conversation or share your takeaways, head on over to our Instagram @Literacy Untangled and comment on your favorite part. I can't wait to hang out with you again soon. Bye.